This video is going to cover the types and forms of contamination. When we're talking about the types of contamination in food service, we are talking about the many things that you don't want in your food and how we can prevent that when we're preparing food for other people's consumption. So, contamination happens in a couple of different ways. There can be harmful substances like germs and bacteria. You can get chemicals into the food, or physical things can fall into the food. And some of those can be harmful or dangerous. And some of those wouldn't cause any trouble, but you just don't want them in the food, such as hair. Food can become contaminated on purpose, but most of it is accidental. So we're just going to talk about the different types, where they come from, and how to prevent them. So they can come directly from the animals. They can come from the air, the dirt, the water. They can come from people. Most commonly, they do come from people. So it can be from person to person. It can be through germ contact. You sneezed into the food, vomited in and around the food, or it can come from the food contact surfaces, like the utensils and the equipment and the tables. It can come from touching dirty food surfaces and then touching the food, and that would be cross-contamination. You took something not contaminated, spread germs to it from something else. So the first type is biological contamination, and this is the one that's going to make you sick. When we talk about an illness from this, we're talking about foodborne illnesses. So that type of illness can make some people just a little sick for a few hours, and it can make some people very sick, even to be deadly. And so we're going to talk about those types of people. But right now, let's focus on the biological contamination. So we're talking about microorganisms. These are small, they are alive, and they're only seen in a microscope. There are lots and lots of microorganisms in and around us. They're a part of us, they're part of our body, and some of these can be good things, but some of them can be bad. So if you get the wrong bacteria, the wrong virus, the wrong organism, and you consume a tiny little bit, then it can make you really, really sick. These are referred to as pathogens. So when we talk about the biological contaminants, we are talking about pathogens. And then some produce poisons or toxins, and then some make you sick and can cause diarrhea, vomiting, fever, nausea, abdominal cramping, and jaundice. There are some of these illnesses that can cause that. And that is when your liver doesn't work right and you get yellowing of the skin and the eyes. So not every person is going to have all of the symptoms. Sometimes you might just have one or a few. Some people don't seem to get it at all, and some people are really susceptible. Not all of the symptoms of foodborne illness is limited to this list either. This is just the most common. And sometimes you can get it within about 30 minutes of eating the food, and sometimes it might take a couple of weeks. So if you get a foodborne illness, it may not even be something that you ate recently or today. It could have been something that you consumed a while ago. The severity can really kind of vary from a little bit of diarrhea or abdominal, gastrointestinal distress, all the way up to death. And so this can be very dangerous for some people. So the first microorganism pathogen, biological contaminant, is bacteria. So bacteria can be found almost anywhere. It lives in our bodies. Some are good bacteria and they keep us alive and healthy, and others cause illness. They cannot be seen, smelled, or tasted. It's really important that you understand spoiled is not contaminated. They are different. So knowing that spoiled food, bad food that's old and been in the fridge for a long time, it may not necessarily make you sick. Don't eat it. But food that can make you sick, it could have been prepared today. If the food service worker, the food handler, wasn't clean, wasn't sanitary, the equipment wasn't clean and sanitary, the food wasn't handled properly, then something made today could make you sick. Contaminated is different than spoiled. So bacteria grows really fast. We're going to have a separate lesson on Fat Tom, but essentially what Fat Tom is bacteria is alive. Just like you, it needs specific things. And if you control those factors, then you will kill or prevent the growth of it. So we want to make sure that is always our goal. Time and temperature. So bacteria lives at a certain temperature. We call this the danger zone, 41 to 135. Above 135, bacteria doesn't really grow or thrive. It can even die. And then below 41, it doesn't really grow or thrive. But room temperature is prime breeding ground. So you want to make sure that you get food items that grow bacteria out of that danger zone in a good amount of time. 2 hours is usually that time. So there are three main types of bacteria that are really contagious and cause severe illness. So if you have this, you can never work around it. And one of the first ones is Salmonella. And we recognize this as coming from chickens and eggs, most commonly, things that are not cooked or handled correctly. These raw items can spread the salmonella pretty quickly and easily. People can die from salmonella poisoning, so it's important to make sure that you are handling it all correctly. Ready to eat food. We're going to talk a lot about ready to eat food. This is food that will not be cooked. Either this food doesn't get cooked, like salad, or this food has already been cooked, like cookies. So beverages can also spread salmonella, raw or undercooked eggs, and this is why we do not eat the cookie dough and poultry. And my students will tell me, oh, well, I've eaten cookie dough hundreds of times. You may not have had the eggs that have the salmonella in it. Not every egg has salmonella. So you're playing a gamble every time you eat the raw cookie dough on whether or not you're going to get sick. Just because it didn't make you sick today doesn't mean the next time it could make you sick. Prevention is to just make sure that hand surfaces, things are washed, you're not spreading this around, and then you cook the food properly. Don't eat raw chicken, don't eat raw eggs. Shigella is found in the feces of humans with the illness. They can be transferred by flies. Eating a tiny, tiny little bit can make you sick, and it can actually live in you weeks after the symptoms have ended. Hand washing your hands, making sure that anything that touches the hands and the hands themselves are constantly and always washed. It is really important if you have diarrhea that you do not prepare food, and making sure that flies are controlled in food service. E. coli. E. coli is something that you hear about pretty often. With E. coli, that is found a lot of times with ground beef, making sure that ground beef is cooked properly and that hands and surfaces and anything that's been around any ground beef is cleaned properly, and that people wash their hands very, very well after they use the bathroom. It can live in your feces for weeks after your symptoms have ended. So making sure that if you have been prevented with it, you're not preparing food, that you are only getting food from a good source, and that you are making sure to prevent cross-contamination between raw meat and ready-to-eat food items. And then I'm going to pause the video and then do part 2.